Hello, I'm Graham Fitch, coming to you from Steinway Hall in London for Pianist Magazine. And this is the first in a series of 3 videos on practicing for a performance. And I'm going to go all the way through from the early stages when we've decided on a piece or a program, right up to sort of the day before the actual performance, and just outline a few stages that we would need to go through to make sure we're nice and comfortable and secure and properly prepared, both pianistically and mentally, because that's also seriously important in this game. So the first video, what I'm going to be talking about now, has to do with the research, the background to what we do before we start, moving fingers across the keyboard. So we'd probably want to listen to some recordings. Despite teachers' admonishments not to listen to recordings, I think most players would, and it's actually okay, provided we listen critically and comparatively. In other words, we listen to several performances, and as we listen, or maybe after we've listened, we make a few bullet points about what we notice to do with the tempo, the energy, the communication, maybe the emotional world of the performance, things like the dynamic range. Did it have a wide dynamic range? What was especially noticeable in the performance? Maybe it's pedaling, maybe it's a particular type of articulation. You just make a bullet point list of the things that you liked, and maybe you could put down some of the things that you weren't so impressed with. And after you've done that with 2 or 3 or 4 different recordings, you'll get a closer idea of what it is that you want to do with the piece, what sort of moods it has, what's maybe the narrative, what emojis would you put in against this theme, maybe some descriptive phrases or adjectives that you could write down. So that would be the first thing I would recommend doing. The next thing is a little bit more philosophical, because what we don't want to do, and this is seriously important, if we're preparing a piece for a performance, we've got to dig foundations downwards before we can erect the building, if you will. The stronger our foundations, the more secure our building is. You just have to think about the story of the 3 little pigs, where it's only the 3rd little pig who takes the trouble to dig down, and he is protected forever from the huffs and the puffs of the big bad wolf, who can't blow his house down. What does it involve? It means avoid the repeated read-through method, which so many people seem to go to. That's where we just open the book, play a few times and realize, oh, I'm not really any good at this yet, so let me play it again. After an hour or so of that, we get into a kind of flow state, maybe, where we're able to play, because we've spent an hour getting to the stage where we can, busk our way through it. The thing with the performance is we have to get it first time, so we don't want to be practicing too much in ways that we're not going to end up using. We need to delay the gratification and avoid reading through over and over again. So the satisfaction at this point, when we're learning, is going to come from the process rather than the product. If you think of the journey rather than the destination, the journey should be just as enjoyable, if not more so, than the reaching the destination. So I've come up with a little slogan. I call it MICE. MICE. So we need mindful practice. We need imaginative, creative, and lastly but not least, enjoyable. So what we do when we practice needs to be enjoyable. So the first thing for research might be to look into the background of a piece. Easy to do nowadays with the internet. Simply Google it. Google the title of the piece and maybe plus program note or something like that. And you'll find that other people have written about the piece, and you'll come up with all sorts of interesting background information. So I've got one example here, the Debussy L'Île Joyeuse, which I love to play. And it's inspired by Watteau's painting L'Embarquement pour Cider, a magical island that these people are heading off to. So if you think in Greek mythology, Cythera was the land of sensual pleasures, indulgence. Now in Watteau's painting, we see flying cupids, we see young lovers around a statue of Aphrodite, you know, the goddess of love. And there's a general feeling of revelry and sensual enjoyment, bacchanalial pleasures, if you will. So if I've got that in mind when I play this, you know, opening trill, maybe I can feel that this is the fluttering of the Cupid's wings. A call to arms, maybe. Maybe this is a kind of sultry heat coming off the, you know, when you see a mirage, you've got the glow of the heat. Perhaps in this register it's different. And then when we come to this spot just afterwards, perhaps the journey has begun. You can feel there the excitement in the air. And a little bit later, I have this image of a boat going through slightly choppy water. This is the un peu cédé section in bar 67, where the left hand is in groups of 5. And if I play just the left hand by itself, you can feel a kind of undulation. And when I set that against the right hand, you can definitely sense that the hands are not, they shouldn't be too much together because we've got 3 against 5. Let me show you a bit. I'm going through the water, tingling with anticipation about this island that I'm about to reach and all the pleasures that await me there. I think you can feel that in the music. And what I would recommend doing is when you play, rather than thinking about the pedaling or the balance between the hands, I'm talking about in the performance, we would tap into that imagery. We'd have that sense of maybe a picture of a movie screen, perhaps, where the boat is moving through the water and we see the island in the distance, that sort of thing, so that we're not fixated on the mechanics of what we have to do, which are completely boring to the listener. We want to communicate the message. So that would be the first thing, a little bit of background research. Now, what about analysis? Some people are really scared of analysis, but analysis is really important if we're to understand a piece of music from the inside out and to get under the skin of it. So we can look at the macro analysis. That's the overall form, sonata form. Here's the first subject, there's the bridge, and there's the second, and this is what he does in the development, he or she does in the development. Maybe it's ternary form, so we have an A section, something contrasting in the middle, and then the return of the A section. I've got here a little tiddly little snippet from a Clementi sonatina, the C major opus 36, number 3, the last movement. And if I just play you a little bit of it, see if you can come up with an emoji that would work for this. Just that first 4-bar section. For me, it's sunshine. It's excited, it's happy, it's joyous, it's spirited. So I've got a little sun that I've drawn on my score. Why not? Doesn't take very long to draw. And it puts me in that mood. Now, the analysis, the more deep analysis could be harmonic. So I might notice I'm in C major, chord 1, chord 1, chord 4, back to chord 1 again. So that might be useful to me to recognize that. I could look on the micro level now at the patterns that we see, which are in the left hand a kind of zigzag backwards and forwards, first of all of a major third and then of a perfect fourth in bar 3. Once I've seen that, I really don't have to read the left hand too closely because I've already understood the pattern. What about the pattern in the right hand? Well, two things I'd noticed there. It's a descending broken chord, tonic chord in the second inversion shape, isn't it here? If I were to play that by itself. And I would notice the repeated notes, the three repeated notes at the end. Now the next bar similarly starts with this broken, in this instance, triad of C major. Then there's a scale of C major that rises up. Yeah, very simple, very basic analysis that I'm doing here. The next bar, I notice something a little expressive, an appoggiatura, if you want to label it. The B is an appoggiatura. So is this. In the last bar, the F sharp, a foreigner in the midst of C major, leans against the harmony and then resolves. An expressive moment. So in my kind of color-coded analysis here, I've put a green circle around my appoggiatura there, and a green circle there. I might notice also this is an appoggiatura from above, whereas that's balanced by being an appoggiatura from below. So that repeated note idea, which I've given a kind of red circle to, here it is not in bar 2, but here it is in bar 3, and again in bar 4. So what I've done is I've used personal pattern recognition, I call that PPR, to just discover some of the patterns that the composer has put up on the page there as I see it. There's one other thing I didn't draw attention to, the turn. In the third bar, the turn around the A from above then below. So I just enjoy recognizing the features. It's a little bit like, oh, look at that, he's put a turn there. Oh, there's the repeated note idea, which we had here and here. It's come back yet again. That sort of thing. Now, if I take you to something a little bit more involved, the B-flat major invention of Bach, two-part invention, I'm going to just do a little bit of analysis, and I'm only going to do maybe on the macro level. Let's look at the first 8 bars. So we've got B flat major, and I notice now that there's a slight difference, well, a considerable difference in the way that the music's organized. And then he seems to be falling downwards. Step lower, a step lower. And that's his lowest point. Then he starts again on the dominant, in the dominant, with the material that we found at the beginning flipped on its end, so it's inverted. The right hand now has this broken chord idea, and the left hand has the idea that the right hand started with. Now, if we go back and look a little bit on the micro level at what we've got, well, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because he starts off on the keynote, goes up 3, and comes back down again to the keynote. Then we've got a broken chord, first of all in a kind of zigzag pattern, then a descending pattern to the D, then immediately an inversion of that idea. Now that's marvelous to see, isn't it? It's so interesting to notice. Wow, look what he's done. Now he's turned that upside down. And underneath it, I'm noticing the harmony in the left hand. If I block out the left hand harmony, chord 1, the next bar, chord 4, the next bar, chord 5, on the tonic pedal, and then tonic. So we've got chord 1, chord 4, chord 5, and then design. I could go on for a long time with this, looking at the design features. They gradually will reveal themselves to you if you're switched on to that. So what you notice that we're doing is we're avoiding muscles too soon, the muscular memory. I'm much more interested at this stage of the game in finding out a little bit under the skin of the music, how the music is put together. We're going to come back to that piece in the next video, but before we leave it, I'd like to introduce you to the idea of tracking. Well, at least I call it tracking. It's where we divide the piece up into chunks, and either on the score or on a copy, it could be a photocopy or a digital copy, we're just going to mark the sections in. So, for example, section 1 obviously begins at the beginning, and that goes up to the first beat. For me, anyway, you may find that you want to divide this up differently. It goes up to the first note of bar 6, and then the second track starts on the beginning of first note of bar 6. And that's the end of track 2. Then we have track 3 to G minor, and so on. I won't go on with my analysis because we'll be here all day. Track 4 starts at the end of bar, I think it's bar 13, yes, bar 13, when we have this. And then track 5, halfway through bar 16. Now, you may wonder, well, why are we doing this? Why divide it up in this way? It's useful on many levels. We'll discover later when we start learning it, that we can assign ourselves or have our teacher assign for us specific activities to do with each track. So maybe week 1 of learning this, we're going to do ultra slowly the first track and maybe separate hands, the second track, this sort of idea. And maybe we'll do track 4 in special ways, maybe some rhythmical work we could do on track 4. Maybe we could do on track 5 controlled stops. I'm going to get into this in detail in the next video, but do you see the promise here? We can organize our practice, we can structure our practice in ways that having this tracking system there really helps us do. Finally, before I leave you, consider doing some practice away from the piano. That's mental practice. The idea of mental practice is where we look at the score and we try and hear the music as clearly as we can. Also, you can imagine yourself playing the music. This is very, very useful, and scientists have discovered that a combination of practicing at the instrument and practicing away from the instrument together, that's a very powerful combination. So do join me in the second video where I'll be looking at deep learning practice techniques. Thank you for joining me. See you soon.